Just to clarify one thing about public prayers, because Premier Legault was very anxious about that back in December. So what do you say exactly to Montreal mayor?
We say that the government should make it an obligation for cities to have a policy on secularism, and that policy should resolve this issue, should be notably about prayer in the street. So the cities, they need to do their job, to consult experts, to ask citizens what they think, and to have a policy about prayer in the streets.
But I may add that they already have the power to do it. So they should use it right away.
They have the power. Now we're suggesting that it should be an obligation for them to use that power.
Okay, that's it's this now. The story, by the way, is broader than that. That's just one part of the story. That's Gabriel Rousseau, by the way. We had him on about a half an hour ago. He's part of this committee that the government had look at laïcité in our schools and apparently also on our streets. They've come up with 50 recommendations. Jim, you saw the basic story on this, and you heard that little clip there with respect to what would happen on our streets, talking about it as far as Montreal is concerned. What do you make of what you heard today?
Well, I asked specifically that clip be used as we come in on this, Aaron, because Mr. Rousseau is not very subtly saying we need to use cities and towns as the enforcement arm for Bill 21. That we think that the collective fear, the collective almost psychotic on the part of the CAQ determination that no smidgen of any religion, perhaps other than Catholicism, appear in Quebec life be extended everywhere. And it's up to mayors and other levels of government to make sure that Quebec society is not polluted by the presence or the appearance of other religions. But what I find fascinating is that it also, among those recommendations, they're now saying they want to remove religious symbols from government-subsidized daycares. Because, I don't know, I mean, maybe it's possible, you know, you're not old enough to know what boogers are, but you will be, in fact, be seduced to a particular religion. Maybe that's possible. Or maybe this is just another of the CAQ's dog and pony shows. You know, back in the day, they did this all the time. They didn't have anything resembling policy. They had no success in trying to, you know, behave like adult politicians. So they turned around and said, be frightened of everything. It's an amazing coincidence. I'm not suggesting the timing was deliberate. It's an amazing coincidence, however, that this Bill 21 press conference takes place on the same day where it was all but confirmed, and was confirmed later in the day, that François Legault is going to be appearing next Tuesday before the Legault inquiry, a public inquiry which, quite frankly, nobody can believe. I don't know if you've had anyone else on the show to say this, Aaron, but no one can believe the extent of the damage and the simple destruction that even the past 2 weeks of hearings have done to this government. It's going to be very, very difficult for them to come back as anything other than a product of what the findings of the Gallant Commission are. But what I find fascinating in all of this as well, Aaron, is that, you know, you could say, a cynical person, as you like to say, call me cynical, but a cynical person might suggest that this is coming out to try and distract from that, to distract from all the travails that the CAQ are going through. But there is one little fun fact that I'd like to share with our listeners. Remember back in 2018, at the height of Roxton Road, François Legault was screaming like a banshee over the fact that asylum seekers, we have to give them housing, we have to give them education. They're costing us $300 million. It's crazy. We can't afford this kind of nonsense. And Ottawa's got to cough up some money. And what's interesting is here we are in 2025 with the Gallant inquiry determining that an attempt to digitalize the operations of the SAAQ went $500 million over budget. Yeah. We don't know who or how many people are responsible for this, but you know what, Aaron? I think we can be reasonably sure that not a single one of them was wearing a hijab.
You know, I'm trying to understand, again, you have to sort of look at something like this, and I understand, with respect to the timing, Jim, this panel, this committee that put it together, I think anytime this would have come out, this is an odd look for the government again. You think this is them falling back on the whole immigrant issue all over again because they know this wins for them?
Absolutely. And the problem is they're not sure if it still wins, so they want to get this out there sooner rather than later.
Okay.
The fact is, I mean, we've said it on the show in different contexts, and now it's becoming glaringly obvious that when in doubt, this government would try to find some threat, turn around and say, listen, we have to have a law because, these people are coming or this is happening or this. Yeah. It was all rubbish from the get-go, whether it was immigrants or Anglos or some great dark unknown that threatened to, envelop Quebec culture, identity, and Quebecers themselves. Remember how it would be suicide? Suicide, said Legault, for Quebec to increase its immigration levels. Listen, the melodrama is beginning to wear a little thin. It's going to be fascinating to hear what Monsieur Legault says next Tuesday. But as I say, there is, as far as I'm concerned, there is zero way for this government to recover from this. And quite frankly, Aaron, after 8 years of this rubbish, I think it couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of people.
Meanwhile, on the municipal side, Jim, speaking of a nicer bunch of people, Projet Montréal started to take stuff back. We had Luc Rabouin. By the way, I feel the need to point out, I don't know if I said this yesterday, this idea on Camille Hood, he's not canceling the project. His words, I believe, were he's delaying the project. Yeah, so let's not get too excited.
Yeah, well, no, he's delaying the project until after the election. But right now, he knows, as I said yesterday, this is an anchor around his neck. And it's fascinating to see that, he climbed down on Camille Hood. He climbed down on that very local but blown up issue of garbage collection in Hochelaga Maisonneuve. And today he has sort of admitted that our housing policy to try and convince people to build, to try to convince developers to build in Montreal has been a bit of a failure because they have the 20-20-20 thing where you have to have social housing and affordable housing and family housing. And if you didn't want to build that, you'd have to pay a penalty if you're a developer. The thing is, most of the developers just paid the penalty because they said, look, we don't have the time for this. But above and beyond everything else, and this is not exclusive to Projet Montréal, Aaron, but the fact is, for decades, any developer, and I'm sure you've had them on the show saying, I'd love to build in Montreal. I'd love to develop in Montreal, but I can't get through the red tape. I can't get through the consultation process. I can't wait for God knows how many bureaucrats to get back to me. I've got a project here. If I can't do it here, believe me, there are other places I can do it, and they have indeed done it. If you just take a look at the 450, and that's the real issue. And like I say, for the past 20 years, Montreal, if you have a plan to develop in Montreal, it's the equivalent of throwing it into a vat of molasses. You may get it back, but it's going to take a very, very long time.
I wonder, Jim, you read the auditor or saw part of the Auditor General's report as well. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in here, and this shouldn't come as news to Montrealers, at least some of it anyway, the condition of roads, the money being cut from budgets. But then the part about, talk about scandals. You read about the STM in here. They have almost $600,000 of parts that were ordered that are sitting around collecting dust.
$600,000 worth of parts?
Yeah.
That's almost like what? That's almost 2 years' salary for the head of the STM, isn't it? Like that's how. No, honestly, Aaron, whether it's the STM, whether it's roads, I mean, the thing that gets me in all of this is after 4 decades, and it's a lot of that time spent covering City Hall. None of this is new, Aaron. Yeah. The idea that the roads aren't being repaired because we have no mechanism to coordinate it. Gerald Tremblay, for crying out loud. I remember we did the story. We're going to have a committee to coordinate traffic work and this and that and blah, blah, blah. It went nowhere. I mean, you can bring on Rick Lechner. He'll tell you the same thing. All these committees, all these commissions, all these agencies have gone absolutely nowhere. Because why? Because for the past 25 years, and I'm sorry, let's give credit where credit is due. We have to thank that nice Jean Charest for getting rid of forced mergers. He created this elephantine, ridiculous, Byzantine, overpopulated, overpaid, overstaffed bureaucracy plus governance, more than 100 councillors. Give me a break. Nothing gets done because everybody's studying something, Aaron, and it's not going to change. It doesn't matter if it's Projet Montréal. There has to be some fundamental change in how Montreal is governed. Normally back in the day we'd say, well, it's not impossible that Quebec is going to, place Montreal under trusteeship. But guess what? Quebec's got problems of its own. So we're kind of on our own at this point. But God help us all. I see nothing. I see no glimmer of hope on the horizon. Honest to God, for Montreal taxpayers, I think it's going to be more the same old for at least the next 5 years.
Well, there is an election in November. All right, let me give me a quick take on what I started the show with today. My question was, and I don't know if you saw this yesterday, Donald Trump signing an executive order that would make burning the American flag an offense, even though it's in the Constitution, in the First Amendment anyway, in the U.S. You'd spend a year in jail. And there's some people suggesting maybe we should consider doing the same thing in Canada. You want to burn?
That's absolute rubbish. That is absolute rubbish. The Supreme Court of the United States of America, for whatever that's worth, has already ruled that if you want, the flag is an inanimate object. Donald Trump, once again, because we don't hear that much about it because, as I say, mainstream media there is in his pocket, but his poll numbers are crashing and burning. And like the cat, he has to have some diversion. So guess what? All of a sudden, flag burning. Tomorrow it may be, people who speak disparagingly of his government or take his name in vain. It's not impossible. But talk about absolute rubbish that, go a year in jail. And the idea that for some reason, your identity is wrapped up in a piece of fabric. That is absolute nonsense. It's been proved over and over and over again that people who made the real sacrifices for this country weren't doing it for a piece of fabric. They were doing it for their fellow Canadians and for their country. And the idea that somehow that inanimate object has become suddenly the repository of our honor, of our identity, as far as I'm concerned, is absolutely insulting.
James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.